Well, hello, good evening, and welcome to episode 61 of Fracking Nightmare. Now, we're running a few minutes late this evening due to a few technical difficulties at the start of Humanity versus Insanity at 7:30 this evening. A program in which we were discussing the remarkable number of deaths associated with alternative health practitioners, medical practitioners who challenge orthodoxy, who stand up against big pharma. And with Fracking Nightmare, once again, we're looking at the growing number of people who are challenging the establishment, challenging orthodoxy. The realization that everything is not the way it is cracked up to be in the mainstream media. And as we'll show tonight, it's becoming increasingly obvious that the mainstream media is, of course, simply the propaganda machine for the corporatocracy. Now, since last week's program, I've had a number of phone calls and had a number of email exchanges with people who were very interested in the discussion that I had on the UK anti-fracking community. And if we can bring this slide up on the screen, because I discussed this dynamic holoky, the term I used to describe this holistic non-structure, a structure that works on the principle that every single individual within the community has a role to play, and everybody within the community acknowledges the competencies, the capabilities, the skills, the contribution, whatever, every facet of their work in terms of challenging this insidious industry. It's working. It's working extremely well because, as we discussed last week, the establishment and the industry is behaving like a cross between a cornered, wounded animal and a petulant child. And we're going to see as we go through the course of the evening how that is manifesting and what we can expect. But as we look at every aspect that we're facing right now, more and more authority is being taken up to the central level. So much for localism. This is simply a charade to create the impression that what the local community thinks has any real bearing whatsoever. Now, on Sunday, I was up in Skelmersdale. And for those regular viewers, of course, last week I had as my guest on the show Marianne Wall, who is one of the prime movers in the campaign to prevent the expansion of the White Moss landfill. Now, on Sunday, it was an extremely miserable day. It was raining. The temperature can't have been much more than about 9 or 10 degrees, and the rain was freezing cold. But nonetheless, there was a good turnout, more of which in a second. But I want to just show you this short interview that I had with Marianne at the gates of White Moss landfill at the end of the day. Right, I'm here with Marianne, and we're at the gates of White Moss landfill, just outside Skelmersdale. It's a beautiful summer Sunday afternoon. It's cold, it's wet, it's miserable. Marianne, how do you feel today has gone?
I feel it's gone fantastic today. We've had a fantastic turnout. We've had people from the local community and we've had people from the wider community. I'd like to say a really big thank you for those people for coming today, for understanding and appreciating the impact that this landfill will have on the local community and the wider community in the near future. The chemicals that will be taken into this landfill are absolutely diabolical. They are fracking fluids. They are more extreme fluids than what chemicals than what we even imagine them to be. Just a really big thank you for people to come and discuss this today.
It was wonderful to see people literally from all over Lancashire and some from further afield. How do you feel that it's gone with the local community? Are you happy with the support you're getting from the local community?
There is some support from the local community. People are thankful. People have come and said, you know, how grateful they are for these people to gather today, for us all to do it in their name. People are grateful. A lot of people just need a bit more momentum at the moment to actually come out and enforce and to come out and do what they can do themselves. There are people supporting, but we need a hell of a lot more.
And I think even some local people I've spoken to didn't really appreciate how this landfill, which was promised was going to be shut 20 years ago, it's still operating, and it's going to be increased in size by about 6 times, I think.
Tenfold, I believe.
Tenfold.
Tenfold.
Wow.
It's a vast area. It's a vast amount of land. People don't appreciate that. It's been here since 1975. It should have actually been closed by 8 different occasions. It should have been closed by now. They weren't able to cap. They weren't able to fill the landfill that they have, and now all of a sudden they can actually fill a tenfold with 150,000 tonnes per year.
And the research that's available, some of the research is 15, 20 years old, showing that the negative health impacts on people who live within relatively close proximity and also a bit further afield, the research shows that there are undeniable negative health impacts in the community.
Through the hearings, through the inspectorate case that we went through last year, we raised a number of issues. We covered cancers, we covered, rare cancers that people don't have in other parts of the country that have been, they feel are associated to the landfill. We have a high Asperger's, dyslexia, dyspraxia, ADHD. We have a large number of childbirth deficiencies, so you may call it, disfigurements. We have a large community of disability people, disabled people. We have a lot of things going on, and we have people on kidney dialysis. People feel that this is associated, but at the moment do not have any proof and don't feel strong enough to come out and say this is associated. But we have a lot of talk in the town which we feel is associated with this landfill.
And so hopefully from here on in, the local people will rally behind and get this shut down.
I'm hoping they feel that this is a stream where they can exercise their voices, they can actually speak out. Whether it's fact or it isn't, people should have space to talk about the feelings, whether they feel it's associated or not. They should have room to talk, be able to bring it out into the open, and if other people are saying the same thing and we can find a connection, all the better for our fight.
Excellent. Thank you, Marianne, and thanks for organising this day out.
Thank you for having us, Ian, and thank you for coming today.
It's a pleasure, but next time, can you do something about the weather?
They don't call it sunny Skem for nothing.
That was, despite the weather, it was an excellent day. It was great to hook up with some familiar faces and also meet some new ones. It was wonderful to see people there from Liverpool, from Greater Manchester, from Wigan, and from the Fylde. Perhaps the concern is that the number of truly local people was very much in the minority. And this is part of the establishment strategy. It is their belief that the population of Skelmersdale, which is a deprived area, and their belief is that the local community will not be able to rally the resources together to offer any meaningful opposition. Yet this is something that is going to have tremendous impact on people in the surrounding area. The prevailing winds are westerlies. Now, prevailing means the majority of time, but for other times the winds can be coming in any direction in this country. So the reality is that the prevailing winds will take the toxic dust across Wigan and on into Greater Manchester. But should the wind direction change, then it'll be going up to the Fylde or, of course, down into Liverpool city centre. So this is a classic example where the wider community needs to come together, needs to rally to support the local community. As you heard Marianne state in that short video, there is a very high concentration of disabilities, some of which I was witnessing on Sunday, a high level of autism and Asperger's, and as she rightly says, although the high level can't be linked directly to the landfill, it's more than perhaps coincidental. The residents of what was effectively a Liverpool overspill community were advised that the landfill would be shut down some 20 years ago. Not only is it still operating, it's about to expand. So please watch this space, and if you can support the people of White Moss, Skelmersdale in any way, shape or form, please do so. They have Facebook pages, they also have a website, and I think this is something that we're going to be hearing more of in the weeks and months to come. Well, I was hightailing it back to the southwest of England on Sunday evening, but I took the opportunity to stop off at the Woolston and Thelwell Protection Community, where I was made very welcome, made a nice cup of tea, and it was actually going to be someone's birthday party, but unfortunately I had to leave before the festivities got underway. But this community is literally at the junction of the A57 and the M6. So on the western side of the motorway, sorry, the eastern side of the motorway, on the Manchester side of the motorway. So if you do get an opportunity to drop off and say hi, you'll get a warm welcome. And if you want to find out more about what's going on in the area, then there's people there that are more than happy to share their insights and their wisdom, and even their cooking. And this is their herb garden. And as I was driving out, I noticed this sign on the side of the road there. YouTube Voices from the Gas Fields. Well, it was perhaps opportune then that I had been asked if I would drop off some copies of the DVD, which are being handed out to passers-by and to visitors who show some interest. Well, Voices from the Gas Fields has been up on YouTube now for almost 3 months. And according to YouTube, it's had 12,866 views. That's as of earlier today. Now, 6,000 of those views were in the first week. The rest, allegedly, have been in the subsequent 11 weeks. But I am also told that every time it's viewed on Facebook and not double-clicked so that it goes to YouTube, that view doesn't count. So who really knows? But the reality is that the word is definitely getting out there. So I'm going to share not a short clip from Voices, a short clip from another film, a film produced by Christian van Wyk, a New Zealand-based Dutch film producer. And this is an extract from Mind the Matrix, where she gave me the opportunity to discuss the unconventional gas agenda. So we'll take this as the break and join me in part 2.
I think it's some sort of internet fraud or something.
A solution to something that isn't particularly sensible, like what many other solutions that we've come up with as humans that don't work.
Problems with it are somewhat over-exaggerated.
Just another get-rich-quick for a whole lot of unscrupulous miners, I think.
I think it needs further investigation.
People need to realise a country needs to be run like a business. You can't get left behind in the world, and if you want to make money, you need to use your resources.
I have very negative feelings about that.
Exploitation of unconventional gas involves pumping millions of gallons of a mixture containing water, sand and chemicals at pressures of up to 15,000 pounds per square inch into the target geology to fracture the rock and release the trapped gas. This is known as hydraulic fracturing or fracking. Approximately 40% what is pumped down the well is actually recovered. Where that gas and fluids escape to cannot be totally controlled.
This is my home up here on Crawberry Hill. It's actually it's been my home since January, when it was donated to me by somebody who saw me doing a live broadcast from my tent on Barton Moss in Manchester. You know, this is an industry, the unconventional gas industry, that has left an absolute trail of devastation wherever it has been unleashed. And although it's classified as a novel industry in the UK, there's nothing novel about it, because we have 20 years of experience of this industry from the US, from Canada, and much more recently, of course, from Australia. And the evidence of the damage, the contamination to water, soil, air, the impact on people's health is absolutely horrendous. One well that has been drilled and subjected to a full frack, and that was at Priest Hall over the other side of the country near Blackpool in 2011, and that resulted in 2 minor seismic events, one on April 1st and the following one on May 27th, which resulted in some 80 properties being damaged. François Hollande, the president of France, and he upheld the presidential ban on hydraulic fracturing that was imposed by his predecessor, Sarkozy. But a Texan company called Studbach took the French government to court and tried to get that presidential ban lifted, but the courts upheld the presidential ban. You know, it doesn't work. The only thing that is proven is that it causes horrendous contamination of the water table, the soils, the air. It has a horrendous impact on the health of the people who live close by and those who live downwind.
And this is proven?
Absolutely. I mean, the evidence is irrefutable. Well, eventually, of course, what they will look for in the EU is what they call harmonisation. And those countries that are opposing it right now will be forced, potentially, to allow hydraulic fracturing in their territory. I mean, the countries that are strongest against fracking right now, interestingly, are the two countries very much at the heart of the EU, and that's Germany and France. Elsewhere, there is an enormous pressure to get this industry up and running. In the US, the water is being sucked out of the Great Lakes, the Great River System, and the great aquifers under the western states. People who live in the western states are having their lives destroyed. In Australia, the Great Artesian Basin is being sucked dry at a rate 6 times greater than it can naturally replenish. Here in the UK, if this industry kicks off, within a generation, the UK will be uninhabitable. And this whole deal of demonizing Russia and using, of course, the Ukraine crisis to facilitate this. The whole Ukraine crisis is, of course, manipulated. Totally manipulated. It's manipulated by those who believe themselves to be the rightful rulers of a planetary fiefdom. And the real target of this is Russia. And the reason being is that Putin has done an amazing job, of course, of gaining significant independence from the global banking establishment. And now they want to try to destroy his economy. And Russia, of course, does export gas into Eastern Europe and into Germany. The US unconventional gas industry has drilled something in the region of 500,000 wells in the last decade. And now they have a surplus of gas. So the US is desperate to find an export market for this surplus gas. And by forcing the EU to implement sanctions against Russia and stop importing gas from Russia, of course, what the US is doing is shutting off that gas market from Russia and saying, well, buy ours. Well, there you go. That's an extract from Mind the Matrix, which has been on YouTube for, I think, about a month now. And it has had something like 33,000 views. So that's actually having potentially greater impact than Voices from the Gas Field. So whatever it takes. Well, over the last week, Quadrilla have announced, of course, that they are going to appeal the Lancashire County Council decision. No surprises there, but of course, on the other hand, it is indicative of the fact that they have no intention of taking account of the will of the local population. And just the ongoing saga, of course, we caught Amanda Webster, pictured giving Stuart Perigo, the council planning officer, some advice and guidance. And of course, we have a Freedom of Information request in, asking precisely what her role was and the reason for her actually having the ear of Stuart Perigo during the proceedings. Well, that Freedom of Information request is due to have a response by absolutely no later than the 31st of July, which I believe is Friday. So hopefully on next week's show, we'll be able to divulge precisely what Amanda Webster, or of course, if it wasn't Amanda Webster, who was it? But precisely what she was doing in the course of the proceedings there. Now, something that I actually meant to cover a couple of weeks ago, but for varying reasons didn't, but I want to do it now. This is the editorial produced by The Sun on the day after Lancashire County Council took the decision to reject Quadrilla's applications for sites at both Rossiter and Preston New Road. Now let me just read this to you. It's in the editorial. Fracking fools. Fracking is too important for Britain's future to be scuppered by spineless nobodies on Lancashire County Council. Yesterday, they cravenly surrendered to the fact-free hysteria of tree-hugging zealots, still propagating long-debunked scare stories about shale gas extraction. The council's own planning officers had recommended they approve the UK's first drilling. Instead, they buckled. The middle-class Green Brigade claimed to be friends of the earth, yet they are the enemies of reason. And everyone on low pay hit by sky-high energy bills. Shale gas could be a godsend for them. The government must veto parochial politicians acting out of fear and ignorance against the national interest by giving a speedy nod to Quadrilla on appeal. This, of course, is completely outrageous. And in doing so, the Sun has exposed its hand, not that it really needed to be exposed, but it is totally anti-democracy. The Sun is nothing more than a mouthpiece, a Murdoch mouthpiece for the corporatists, targeted at the masses. Sadly, it's alleged that some 13 million people read, and I'll use the term read loosely, the Sun every single day. Well, to write such tosh, to dismiss the outstanding efforts of the councillors who weighed up the evidence, the fact that they decided that the experts who were presented by the opposition were more credible than the experts presented by the industry is testimony to their objectivity. So what do we do about the Sun? Well, we can actually start by joining the people of Liverpool who for, what is it now, some 26 years have effectively boycotted the Sun. So the Sun clearly is an antithesis of democracy, an antithesis of community, and wants the corporatists to achieve their insidious goals regardless of the impact on the communities. So it's been a long time coming, but it's time to boycott the Sun. And anytime you see somebody reading the Sun, maybe ask them why it is that they continue to read such a corporatist rag. Well, fortunately, the opposition are continuing to raise funds to launch their judicial review. And as of shortly before we went on air, the fund, which is seeking to raise £10,000, which is the potential cost of a judicial review if they unfortunately lose. And up until a few hours ago, 184 people had donated or contributed to this fund, raising a total of £4,331. Now, there are just 12 days left, which means that close on £500 on average every day needs to be raised. Now, you can find this page by searching Lancashire County Council Fracking Crowdfunder, or words to that effect. Go to the page and please, if you can make a donation, please do so. It's obviously being coordinated by one of the Lancashire community groups. But this is something that we need to support from right across the country. And I must confess that I'm a little disappointed that after some 20-odd days that only 184 people have contributed to this. But look, if you can't contribute, and I completely understand if that is the case, then help by sharing it. Help by sharing this around your circle of friends, colleagues, and social media. This is a very, very important fund to support. Now, last week I also made the observation that in response to the Lancashire County Councillors rejecting Quadrilla's application to frack at Rossiter and Preston New Road, the government basically decided to give the residents of the Fylde the finger by approving the gas caverns in the Wyre, which is the northern end of the Fylde Peninsula. Here we are. That's where it's located, right up on the eastern bank of the Wyre, just south of Knott End and to the southeast of Fleetwood. It's a beautiful part of the country, and obviously there have been people there trying to campaign to prevent the gas caverns being established. And it's actually been a campaign that's been going on for some 12 years. And as I mentioned last week, Lancashire County Council actually rejected this as long ago as 2010. But in a fit of petulance, the British government decided that it was going to approve these gas caverns. Now, this is a joint project between Cantax and Halite, and they're looking to construct 19 caverns, varying sizes, via a leaching process, which is effectively acidizing out the caves. Well, this falls upon Amber Rudd, but Amber Rudd actually omitted to mention that her brother is actually the chairman of the PR company employed by Halite and has been working to get the approvals here. And to be fair, it was the Daily Mail, I think, that first flagged this up on the 29th of May. And there was the headline, "The Energy Secretary, her brother, and an explosive decision she won't be making." It says, Energy Secretary Amber Rudd will play no part in the major decision, despite the fact the energy firm is represented by a lobbying group chaired by her brother. Now, this article appeared a few days ago, and let me just read part of this, because it says, a spokesman said the decision was never due to have been made by her and that it would be down to a junior minister. So let me see how that works. A junior minister who is reliant for his career progression and maybe even his actual career stability is asked to review the gas caverns in the Wyre. Now, Amber Rudd has no influence over this whatsoever, but he knows very well that she has a vested interest because her brother is the £3 million chairman of Finsbury PR company, and he is driving this agenda. What do you think he or she is going to do? Call it a hunch. I think they're going to rubber stamp it. But of course, it doesn't end there, because as we see further down the article, it says here, chairman for the lobby group Business for New Europe, Roland Rudd, was involved in the doomed campaign in favour of joining the euro. He's a friend of Peter Mandelson, who is godfather to one of his children and has worked as a researcher for SDP founder David Owen. Now, let's understand one thing. Peter Mandelson doesn't have friends. Okay? The only reason that Peter Mandelson makes any contact with anybody is because they have a use. That's how he works. So, Roland Rudd, you are clearly one of Peter Mandelson's useful acolytes. And Amber Rudd, you should hang your head in shame. But of course, there's no such thing as shame in 21st century politics. In fact, isn't it quite ironic that some of the truisms that have been published in today's media, like on David Cameron, the most facile, superficial PM there's ever been. But to get that kind of truth, it has to come from a peer under the influence of cocaine. So maybe I'll be a little easier on the coke users, because it seems to generate some truth. The only area where I might disagree is where he says George Osborne, a very, very consummate politician, a future PM. May God help us all. So, Amber Rudd, you are guilty here of abuse of office. That is the only way to describe it. It is abuse of office. You should have recused yourself completely from this process, recused your department from the process, and the people of Wyre should be launching whatever judicial process is open to them to get this decision overturned. Well, we're not really surprised, are we, that that's the way that these things pan out, but I would encourage people in the Wyre to do their own research, and here's an HSE, Health and Safety Executive report from 2008, failure rates for underground gas storage. Now, of course, the government and their representatives will tell you that, there's risk in everything. Well, just so you understand the risk, I think you've probably done your own research anyway, but it's certainly not risk-free. So we know how the British establishment functions. And of course, over the last few weeks now, there have been a lot of calls echoing the outrageous editorial in The Sun, calling for the government to remove all local authority participation in the decision-making process of exploitation of unconventional gases. Now, the reality is that at the moment the process is still in place where it has to go through the local authorities, but it is becoming evident that some of those companies are deliberately delaying their applications in the anticipation that their lobbying is going to pay dividends and they are simply going to be able to get the rubber stamp from central government. And this is what we absolutely, of course, have to resist. So if you are watching this tonight and you have any role in the local authority, then understand that central government is looking to take that role away from you. The government isn't interested in any kind of localism. It's just a total charade. Well, what's coming down the pipe is, of course, the adjudication of the 14th round. And let's take a look at what's going to be occurring here. Okay, let's pull up this map here. This is a map many of you will have seen. I've been using it for best part of 2 years. And this shows the areas that are licensed, that is the brown areas, and the areas in green, which are effectively up for grabs on the basis of 295 licenses. So 18% of the UK is already licensed, and the 295 licenses that are on or were on offer last October represents 46% of the country, 46%. Now, what we do know is that of those 295 licenses, 95 have been bid for. So that represents about a third of the land that was made available in the 14th round. Now, Andrea Leadsom, who is junior minister to Amber Rudd, it may be Andrea Leadsom that took the decision on the gas caverns. And I'm sure Andrea will simply do precisely what she's told by her boss. So we know that of the 95 licenses that have been bid for, the awards are going to be announced in 2 stages. And what Andrea Leadsom has alluded to is that the first stage will be licenses in areas that do not require detailed environmental impact assessment. In other words, what that sounds like is it's going to be areas that are considered to be brown fields. Now, this is something that we should be extremely concerned about, because this was a process used in the US before the advent of the Environmental Protection Agency, where areas were zoned. And if an area was zoned as for industrial use, then basically there was no regulation, no control whatsoever. And in the late 1980s, a super fund had to be set up. And this super fund could be tapped into by companies acquiring land or acquiring companies that were on land that had been contaminated due to total lack of regulation. And that mess in the US is something that is a legacy that is going to be felt for many, many generations to come. And this is potentially what we're facing in the UK here. Brownfields locations where the government effectively decides that it's going to minimise the amount of scrutiny and simply rubber stamp these companies to go ahead. So, by the end of this year, the likelihood is that 33% of the country, 33% of the landmass will be licensed. 1/3 of the country. Now let's take a look at the prime target areas. Now this is pure conjecture. Obviously I have no insight particularly, but it's based on my assumptions from my my research. Now, prime target area is the central belt of Scotland, and most of these bids in this area will come from either or a combination of the two. INEOS, which of course is headed up by Jim Ratcliffe, who's recently returned to the UK from his base in Switzerland. But I think that much of that central belt of Scotland, particularly over the eastern side, is likely to be bid for by INEOS. Particularly, I think they're looking certainly to get as much of the area as they can around their Falkirk processing plants. So that's Scotland. Then right across the Bowland Shale. And here it's going to be a combination primarily of iGas, and I think we're going to see the emergence of the new Peel company, Peel Oil and Gas. We may even see joint bids from iGas and Peel, where Peel have the land and iGas bring the extraction technology. Of course, the other company that's in there is Quadrilla and Rathlin and Third Energy. But I'm not sure that they will have necessarily made additional bids. I think the real threat comes from iGas and Peel. And of course, there's a number of brownfield sites there, much of them along the Manchester Ship Canal, land owned by Peel Holdings. Then we have the Eastern Pennines, the old coal workings there. This, of course, will be for the extraction of coal bed methane. And the companies there, primarily iGas again. Of course, iGas are looking to establish a well, looking to frack a well in Misson Springs, just outside Bawtry in South Yorkshire. But I think iGas and Hutton, who have a site at Radcliffe in Nottinghamshire, and I think they're going to be looking to pick up licences in that area. Then in South Wales, this is Gerwyn Llewellyn Williams. This is UK Methane, or his other company, Coastal Oil and Gas. Same guy at the top. And I think he's going to be looking to pick up pretty much everything that was on offer in South Wales. So then, of course, it's the Weald, and right across the southeast of England. And I think here we're looking at iGas, Magellan, Quadrilla, and other Mickey Mouse companies like Horse Hill Developments, which of course no longer has the luxury of having David Lenegas at its head, seeing as he recently resigned. So watch this space. But if you are living in one of these areas and you think that you're out of the woods, then it's time to start taking a serious interest. So 95 additional licenses between now and the year end. Now, once again, see this as a gift. See it as an opportunity, because the industry does not exactly have a good track record in this country. And we have to make sure that we are getting out right across the community, not just to the traditional left, not just to the environmentalist community, but literally all inclusive. We have to find ways to literally be getting across to every part of the social and political spectrum. As I've shown in the way in which the UK anti-fracking community is not structured, then it is all encompassing, and that must be our goal. The bottom line is the industry in reality has very little chance of getting the social license, despite Amber Rudd making a half-hearted plea in Parliament, I think it was last week or the week before at the most, that the industry needed to work on getting social license in the communities. Well, good luck with that, Amber, because the bottom line is, you know it's not going to happen. Everywhere you do a poll, it's 80-20. Sure, you're always going to find a few people in the community who think it's a good idea, for whatever reason. But it's 80-20. And as I've said before, bear in mind that the Tory government is deliberately targeting Tory-held communities. The reason being is because their perverse logic is that the Tory-held community will fight tooth and nail right until the end of all due process. But once they've reached the end of the process, they will simply capitulate, roll over, and allow the trucks to roll in. The communities will not do that. In my opinion, once people do their research, they will know very well that this is something that must never be allowed to succeed. Meanwhile, of course, the price of oil continues to tank. And really, you know, it's now down to 48 bucks. So what part of this industry makes it a viable proposition? This is the look at the price of oil over the course of 10 years. Here we have this outrageous peak running up to the global economic collapse. So here was the peak in July 2008, where it hit $147 a barrel, of course, dropping rapidly by the following November down to 35, but then recovering up to around about 75 bucks. Now, 75 bucks is about the break-even point for unconventional gas extraction. So you can see why it is that it looked like it might be an attractive proposition up until around about September last year, where it has continued to drop. Rose again to about 60, and now once again it's under 50 bucks a barrel. And if we look at the last year, here we go, you can see clearly. And any forecaster will tell you that the likelihood of the price of oil rising much above 70 bucks a barrel for the next decade is slim to none. And of course, with Iran coming back on stream, it's going to put increasing pressure on the traditional producers. So Saudi and Qatar in particular want to maximize their market share. So I can't see how this is viable. And only mug punter investors are going to be pumping anything into these Mickey Mouse companies. So it's all to play for. We certainly are not going to have an easy ride, but look at the massive opportunity. This is bringing communities together like nothing before. I mean, even the White Moss landfill site, it was acknowledged that this had actually worked to at least introduce people within the community to each other who hadn't ever met before. So all of this is really an opportunity. Maybe one that we'd prefer not to have, but we have to take it and embrace it and utilize it as best we can. Now, my thanks to John Marger in East Yorkshire for sending me this, because this is actually a document that was produced by none other than the Environment Agency a few years ago. And within the document, it actually looks at all the environmental risks of shale gas extraction. So surely this is prima facie evidence that the Environment Agency does actually acknowledge that this industry is fraught with potential danger of contamination, or worse. Take a look at what's happened in Oklahoma. This is literally, in the last week, 40 earthquakes hit frack-happy Oklahoma in the last 7 days. And this was reported by Reuters. There was no reported significant damage from the earthquakes over the last few days, but the rate of earthquakes in Oklahoma has increased by about 50% in the last 2 years, greatly increasing the chance for a damaging quake, according to the US Geological Society. There have been 8 quakes of magnitude 3 or larger near Crescent since Saturday, and during the past 7 days, Oklahoma has experienced about 40 earthquakes. Noticeable quakes above magnitude 3 now hit the state at a rate of 2 per day or more, compared with 2 or so per year prior to 2009. And this was a tweet from Kirsty Long last night, 7:22 p.m. She said, big earthquake in Tulsa. Everything shook bad for 30 to 40 seconds. Now, we looked at the growth in earthquake activity in Oklahoma in a recent episode of Fracking Nightmare. It was one, I believe, where Julie Wassmer was my guest. And we went through the history of Oklahoma's earthquake or seismic activity since the 1980s, where it was almost unheard of, to this potential damage from today. So this is Oklahoma, where the geological structure, the strata, is much more stable than that which we have in the UK. Much of this is caused by re-injection, and re-injection should definitely be a concern to the people of North Yorkshire, where Third Energy want to establish a re-injection well, the first in this country, into a different layer of geology than that from which it's being extracted. Now, some coming events which I would draw your attention to. One tomorrow night in North Yorkshire, in Pickering. And this is an event that's been organised not by the anti-fracking community, but by a local GP. This is an event that's been pulled together by Dr. Tim Thornton, who is based in Rydal, I think in Pickering. The event is at the Lady Alumni's School in Swansea Lane, Pickering. That's YO18 8NG. 3 speakers. One, Professor Patrick Saunders, who is a co-author of the MedAct report. Dr. Jill Sutcliffe, who's an environmental scientist, and I'm assuming she must be quite a shy environmental scientist, seeing as I couldn't find a single photograph of her. And the Right Reverend Graham Cray, who is Assistant Bishop in the Diocese of York. So this is Facts Before Fracks, investigating the health and social impacts of fracking, and not in any way, shape or form involving the usual suspects, as it were. This is a completely independent event, and so one that I would encourage you, if you can get along to Pickering. So if you live anywhere in the northeast area, from Teesside, from Humberside right through to Teesside, and up the A1 corridor there, I would encourage you to go along. Very important, increasingly important, because Third Energy in Rydal, of course, want to frack the KM8 well at Kirby Misperton, which is less than a mile from Flamingo, or less than a kilometre actually, from Flamingo Land. And as somebody drew my attention yesterday, Flamingo Land have sponsored Hull City. So thanks to my good friend Jono, he came up with this. Because instead of Flamingo Land sponsoring Hull City, maybe Flamingo Land will need to change its name to Frackingo Land. In fact, there's multiple pronunciations of that. Was it Fracking-o? Frackingo? Frackingo? But I'm sure that the owners of Flamingo Land really must have something to say about the appearance of this industry on its literal doorstep. And then on Sunday, at Crawberry Hill, just outside Beverley in East Yorkshire, there is the anniversary of the Crawberry Hill eviction. And my good friend Dave Maris, about a year ago, compiled this collage of photography from that somewhat eventful day. So we'll take a break and enjoy Dave Maris's collage here. Well, and there you saw some examples, of course, of Humberside Police's intimidatory behaviour. I'm pleased, of course, to report that of those arrested on that day, all charges were ultimately either dropped or dismissed. So this is our 2-year anniversary of Boycott. In fact, today is the 28th. It's 2 days ago that the first trucks rolled into the site at Boycott, where, of course, Quadrilla were unable to complete their intended frack on the basis that they ran out of time before their planning permission expired. And then it's 1 year ago since the eviction at Crawberry Hill. So I'm going to actually play out this evening in this final segment. I'm going to play out with a video that I shot at Crawberry Hill just 2 days before that eviction, giving an update on the situation there. And of course, Rathlin Energy are still not on Crawberry Hill. They only have 91 days of their planning permission remaining. So are they going to apply for yet another extension? And if they do, will the East Riding Council actually have the courage to reject it? Or will they simply capitulate to the central government pressure to rubber stamp Rathlin's activity in East Yorkshire? And then in the final part of this short video, there is a return to Boycott, to an amazing day in Boycott, a day of song that brought people together. And as I've said many, many times, this is a gift. It's bringing people together in this country like nothing before. And the sooner that those 95 licenses are awarded, then it'll give us the opportunity to bring even more of those communities into the fold. We have 300 plus anti-fracking communities around the country right now. By the year end, it'll be at least 400 and hopefully 500. So watch the video and then join me next week for episode 62 of Fracking Nightmare. This is Ian R. Crane. It's Thursday, 31st of July 2014. And as you can see behind me here, Crawberry Castle is still standing, despite the fact that Judge Burse ruled on Tuesday at the High Court that Rathlin and the farmer here should be granted repossession. Somehow I doubt that that repossession is going to be granted freely. So despite the fact that there is a lot going on in the world right now, we have the atrocity of the Zionist government of Israel bombing Gaza in their quest to ethnically cleanse Israel. So in the scheme of things, what's going on here at Crawberry Hill may seem unimportant, but at the same time, what we are facing in the UK is a quest to effectively establish an industry here that has a proven track record of contamination of water, of soil and of the air, and leaving a trail of devastation in terms of negative health impacts. So despite the plethora of evidence to support that statement, the judge ruled on Tuesday that he was not there to judge on the rights or wrongs of fracking. He was simply there to rule on Rathlin Energy's right to access this plot of land here where they want to run a mini frack, despite the fact that Montague Smith, who is the CEO of Rathlin Energy, continues to state that Rathlin have no intention of fracking here. The documentation would suggest otherwise. The Environment Agency permit was requested with a clear intent to perform some kind of stimulation or hydraulic fracturing, and permission was granted. The other issue here is that Rathlin had convinced the local community that this was a short-term exploration, and although their original quest was to be here for 3 years, they were in fact granted 2. And under the existing planning permission, this area, this pad here, has to be returned to its natural state by early November. Now, Rathlin have informed their local community liaison group that due to the requirement for unforeseen environment permits and also the presence of the protection community here, they are unable to complete their mini fall-off test, their mini frack, between now and when they have to vacate the land. So yesterday, the security personnel, Beacon Security, who are contracted by Rathlin, posted the planning notices around the area advising that Rathlin would be submitting their request to extend their time on the pad, and that submission would be placed with the East Riding Council by next Wednesday. Now, that may well not be able to be heard before council until October, and so that is plenty of time for the local community here to do what communities in Balcombe and Whisper Green in West Sussex have done, which is to let their local council representatives know that they not only don't support this application for an extension, but they've become increasingly aware of the dangers associated with this industry. So whereas a few years ago it was perhaps a simple rubber stamping exercise, this time round that won't be the case. In the local media yesterday, in the Hull Daily Mail, Montague Smith says, once again, for the avoidance of any doubt, our work is targeted exclusively at the exploration and potential development of conventional oil and gas resources. Well, he may not necessarily be telling an untruth there. Rathlin may well be focusing on the conventional oil, but the reality is that the purpose for this test is to establish the enormity and the viability of the shale gas resources here. Rathlin Energy have never yet drilled a well that has gone into production anywhere in the world. So consider the possibility, even the probability, that once Rathlin have established the viability of the shale gas here, then they will certainly be looking to sell out to a major provider such as Dart Energy, of course, which will soon be owned by iGas, the new company being Digas. Well, meanwhile, there was another article on the following page of the Hull Daily Mail yesterday by a local columnist, Ian Midgley, and he makes a reference to the new Energy Secretary, Matthew Hancock. I almost felt sorry for Energy Minister Matthew Hancock, Conservative MP for West Sussex, doing the rounds on TV and radio this week, trying to sound convincing that there is support for fracking out in the country. In reality, of course, he couldn't name a single community that embraces hydraulic fracturing. The reality is that everywhere where this process is discussed, the community reaction is to have 70 to 80% of people opposing it. He goes on, Matthew Hancock, looking like a cross between an accountant and a semi-professional snooker player, the two most boring professions known to man, Hancock failed to name a single community in favour of having an energy giant fracking in the green belt next door. He did his best, but the old saying that you can't polish a turd is as relevant today as the day they invented pledge. Well, Matthew Hancock has clearly been put into that role because he will do anything to further his political career. Bottom line, he's a political prostitute, just like the rest of them at Westminster. Meanwhile, down here at Crawberry Hill, the siege has yet to begin.
This land This land is all that we have for sure. This land, this land, this land is all that we have for sure. This land, this land, this land is all that we have for sure. This land, this land, this land is all that we have for sure. This land, this land, this land is all that we have for sure. This land, this land, this land is all that we have for sure. This land, this land.
So starting with the prayer through your feet, allowing yourself to connect with the earth and what that really means. And allowing your song to be a prayer for the children, for our children, and for all of the generations to come, that they have everything that they need to survive. And we're not just talking about our children, we're talking about the children of the police force as well. We're talking about the children of the people that are doing the fracking and the drilling. Their children also need clean water. We're talking about the children of the corporations as well. We are not divided, we are completely united. Every human being needs clean water.